June 1944. Pearl Harbor, territory of Hawaii. The air hung thick with the usual blend of tropical heat, engine oil, and the faint, ever-present scent of salt water. For Commander Eugene B. Gene Fluckey, standing on the sun-baked deck of the submarine USS Barb SS-220, the routine of repair and replenishment was an irritant, a necessary pause in the relentless hunt. Fluckey, already a legend in the Pacific Submarine Force, known to his crew as the Mauler for his aggressive tactics and staggering tally of Japanese ships sunk, was never content with the status quo. He wasn't just thinking about the next patrol. He was thinking about the patrol after that and the one after that. Fluckey's gaze wasn't fixed on the shipyard cranes or the busy stream of sailors. It was fixed on the Japanese home islands, the core of the enemy's war machine. He knew the Imperial Navy was being systematically dismantled by the U.S. fleet, but the final brutal phase of the war, the invasion of the Japanese mainland, loomed large and terrifying. Fluckey saw a way for the submarine force, specifically Barb, to contribute far beyond its conventional role of anti-shipping. His target, the Japanese coast itself. This wasn't a casual thought. Fluckey had spent weeks poring over technical manuals and talking to ordnance experts, formulating a concept that was, frankly, revolutionary for a submarine. He needed a weapon that could be fired from the surface, deliver a substantial payload, and be quickly reloaded and fired again without the sub having to expose itself for an undue length of time. The answer, he believed, lay not in the torpedo tubes, but on the deck. 5-inch, 127mm, rocket launchers. Specifically, the same type of Mark V or Mark 51 launchers used by surface ships and landing craft to deliver saturation fire. A devastating salvo of high-explosive ordnance designed to clear beaches and destroy coastal installations. His request, delivered to his superiors in late 1944, was met with a mix of astonishment and skepticism. Submarines were silent hunters. They stalked tankers, transports, and warships. They did not engage in fire support, let alone launch rockets. It was unprecedented. But Fluckey's reputation was his currency. He didn't just ask. He presented a detailed operational plan outlining how the modification, 5 fixed launchers on the forward deck structure, could be used to conduct high-speed, shoot and scoot raids against enemy coastal towns, rail lines, and shore installations, creating a psychological and material disruption far out of proportion to the size of the attacking force. Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood, Commander Submarine Force, Pacific Fleet Comsipac, known for backing his aggressive captains, eventually signed off. The logic was irresistible. If Fluckey wanted to put rockets on a submarine and could guarantee results, who was going to stop the Mauler? The modifications were carried out with characteristic wartime speed and ingenuity in early 1945. Welders and armorers swarmed over Barb's deck, installing the launchers near the forward gun position. These weren't complex systems. They were essentially simple, open-frame rail mounts, ruggedized for the harsh marine environment. The Barb's crew, led by Lieutenant Commander Paul E. Saunders, the executive officer, oversaw the work. They were not just getting a new weapon. They were receiving a whole new mission, transforming their sleek, silent hunter into an amphibious raider capable of delivering a punch unlike any other boat in the Pacific. It was a gamble, a true technological leap of faith in the final desperate months of the war, and the crew of the Barb embraced it, eager to test the destructive potential of their newly christened weapon system. The stage was set for Patrol 12, a mission that would redefine the role of the submarine in modern warfare, paving the way for the crew's missile-equipped sub decades later. With the new gear in place, the Barb slipped out of harbor, pointed toward the waters off Japan, carrying not just torpedoes, but the revolutionary potential of rocket-powered shore bombardment. May 1945. The USS Barb sliced through the cold, gray waters of the North Pacific, heading toward the assigned patrol area, the Sea of Okhotsk, off the coast of Sakhalin Island and the Kuril Islands. This was a treacherous environment, not just because of the notoriously fickle weather, choked with fog, sudden squalls, and icy currents, but because of the enemy's desperate vigilance. The Japanese knew their supply lines through the northern waters were vital, and they guarded them fiercely, though perhaps with fewer resources than the main arteries near the home islands. Captain Fluckey and his crew were seasoned veterans. This was the Barb's 12th war patrol, a staggering number testifying to the boat's durability and the skill of its rotating crews. Morale was exceptionally high, buoyed by the boat's spotless record. They had completed all previous patrols without a single crew casualty, a statistic bordering on miraculous given the brutal, unforgiving nature of the silent service. This record created an atmosphere of supreme confidence and almost religious trust in their captain's judgment. The initial phase of the patrol was focused on the conventional mission, anti-shipping. The Barb was a wolf among the coastal convoys, utilizing its Mark 18 electric torpedoes and the newer, faster Mark 14 steam fish. Yet, Fluckey was also scouting. Every mile of coastline, every small town, every railway bridge was observed through the periscope. He needed soft, isolated targets, places where a sudden, violent strike could inflict maximum pain with minimum risk to the boat. The Sea of Okhotsk, far from major naval bases, offered exactly the kind of vulnerability Fluckey sought. The rockets themselves were a constant subject of discussion and practice. The 5-inch high-explosive rockets, essentially large-caliber artillery projectiles fitted with solid fuel motors and stabilizing fins, had to be loaded manually onto the 5-deck rails. This was a critical operational detail. It meant the submarine had to surface, the crew had to scramble onto the wet deck under the cover of darkness or thick fog, load the missiles, fire them, and then submerge immediately. Speed and precision were paramount, as any delay meant risking detection by Japanese radar or coastal patrols. Chief Gunners Mate James E. Calloway led the deck crew, meticulously checking the rockets and the rudimentary aiming mechanism, essentially setting the angle of elevation before launch. Fluckey spent hours in the conning tower, working out the approach angles and escape vectors for several potential targets. He favored locations directly adjacent to the Trans-Siberian Railroad spurs running along the coast or near facilities processing coal, timber, or fish, vital resources feeding the Japanese war machine. The plan was not to flatten the city, but to conduct surgical shock and awe raids. The roar of a dozen 5-inch rockets hitting a small coastal town at 2 a.m. would be a terrifying, demoralizing sound, a tangible sign that the Americans could strike anywhere, even in the presumed safety of the far north. The date for the first experimental shore bombardment was fast approaching, and as the Barb prowled the coastline, the crew felt the anticipation building. They were about to become artillery on the surface, a role no submarine had ever successfully executed. June 11, 1945. The designated target, Shari, a small coastal community on the northeastern tip of Hokkaido, Japan. Visibility was poor, a heavy bank of coastal fog clinging low to the water, providing exactly the natural cover Commander Fluckey had hoped for. The Barb crept in toward the shore, the fathometer reading the decreasing depth in the pitch black. The crew moved with the silent, disciplined efficiency of men who had done 12 war patrols together. At 1:30 local time, the order came, surface. With a shudder and a rush of compressed air, the Barb broke the surface, the sea draining rapidly from her hull. The deck crew, led by Calloway, was already scrambling onto the exposed deck, silhouetted momentarily against the gray night. The rockets were heavy. Each 5-inch projectile weighed approximately 55 pounds and had to be manually slotted onto the 5 launcher rails. The crew worked with frenzied speed, conscious that every second on the surface increased their vulnerability. A single, unseen Japanese trawler with a radio could spell disaster. Fluckey was in the conning tower, eyes glued to the target through the periscope, now retracted for surfacing, using the bearings taken just moments before submerging to line up the attack. The target was a small complex of buildings near what intelligence suggested was a coastal storage facility or perhaps a small rail terminus. Load all 5 on target bearing 350. Within minutes, the shout came from the deck, ready to fire, Captain. Fluckey gave the final order, his voice steady against the rush of the sea. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. Fire 5. The effect was instantaneous and deafening. 5 brilliant flashes erupted from the deck of the submarine, followed by the hiss and roar of the solid rocket motors igniting. The 5-inch projectiles, each traveling at high subsonic speed, streaked toward the dark shore, the trajectories leaving momentary trails against the misty backdrop. The sound was immense, shattering the stillness of the northern night. Before the sound of the launch had fully subsided, the rockets slammed into Shari. Secondary flashes and dull, heavy thuds echoed across the water, indicating hits. The mission was successful. Before the echoes of the explosion had reached their peak, Fluckey shouted the next command. "Clear the deck. Dive. Dive. Dive." The deck crew scrambled back down the hatch, securing the heavy steel lid just as the ballast tanks began to flood. Within 60 seconds of firing the last rocket, the Barb was descending rapidly beneath the waves, leaving the burning, shocked town of Shari to contemplate the impossible. The sea itself had thrown fire upon them. This wasn't an isolated incident. Over the next few days, Fluckey repeated the action, honing the technique. He moved further north into the Sea of Okhotsk, striking towns like Shikuka, Kashiho, and Shiritoru. Each raid followed the same successful pattern. Creep and submerged, execute a lightning-fast surface /fire/submerge maneuver, and vanish into the depths. The crew nicknamed the rocket launches mail runs, delivering fiery letters to the Japanese mainland. The psychological impact was profound. The Japanese authorities were baffled and infuriated. Their highly protected coastline was suddenly vulnerable to a weapon they never imagined a submarine could carry, pioneering the concept of an undetected mobile precision shore bombardment platform decades before the introduction of modern sea-launched cruise missiles. The USS Barb had changed the playbook. The impact of the Barb's rocket campaign extended far beyond the immediate damage inflicted on the docks and storage sheds of small northern towns. For the Japanese High Command, the sheer impossibility of the attacks created a significant strategic dilemma. Submarines, by definition, operated in the open ocean or within protected harbors to sink major warships and merchant vessels. Coastal defenses were generally geared toward expecting attacks from surface warships or aircraft, massive operations that provided warning. The sudden anonymous barges delivered by the Barb shattered this assumption of security. The specific targets chosen by Fluckey were strategic nodes for the northern supply chain. At Shikuka, the rockets hit timber processing facilities vital for construction and fuel. At Kashiho and Shiritoru, the strikes targeted small rail yards and communication centers. The destruction was localized, but the disruption was widespread. Railways were critical infrastructure in the northern territories, and even a small rupture could cascade into long delays for moving resources south to the main islands or troops to garrison areas. The Japanese were forced to divert significant assets, coastal patrol craft, small air patrols, and even infantry detachments, away from the core defense of the main islands simply to guard these secondary, northern coastlines against an invisible, rocket-firing threat. Furthermore, the attacks were a psychological hammer blow to the civilian population in areas previously considered entirely safe. Unlike the massive B-29 raids over Tokyo or Osaka, which were understood as attacks by a known powerful force, these coastal raids felt insidious. They were conducted under the cover of darkness and fog, delivered by a phantom vessel that struck and vanished without a trace. Local reports, often heavily censored, spoke of underwater demons or ghost warships. The demoralization caused panic in the northern territories, straining local governance and the military's ability to maintain order and production quotas. Commander Fluckey understood the power of psychological warfare perfectly. The very purpose of the rocket launchers was not just the kinetic destruction of targets, but the maximum operational and mental disruption. By forcing the enemy to dedicate resources and attention to the Sea of Okhotsk, the Barb was contributing to the larger strategy of isolating and squeezing the Japanese homeland. The submarine was essentially forcing the Japanese to stretch their already thin defensive resources across thousands of miles of coastline. Beyond the rockets, the Barb continued its primary mission with relentless success, sinking multiple transports and cargo ships during Patrol 12. The threat of the rockets also served as a brilliant cover and diversion for Fluckey's traditional anti-shipping attacks. As Japanese patrols frantically searched the coastal fog for the source of the shore bombardments, Fluckey was often maneuvering his boat into position to torpedo a convoy moving through the relatively clear offshore shipping lanes. Patrol 12 culminated not just in a history-making deployment of novel weaponry, but in the ultimate demonstration of the Barb's operational mastery. The boat and its crew executed one of the most successful and diverse patrols of the entire war, showcasing an adaptability that promised a future where submarines were not merely stealth torpedo platforms, but multi-mission assets capable of deep penetration strikes against terrestrial targets. The culmination of the USS Barb's incredible combat record arrived with the successful completion of Patrol 12 in mid-June 1945. When the submarine finally returned to base, the accolades were immediate and resounding. Captain Fluckey, who would eventually be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions during a prior patrol, had demonstrated a level of ingenuity and daring that transcended conventional submarine warfare. The successful shore bombardments using deck-mounted rockets were recognized immediately as a groundbreaking achievement. It was a proof of concept, the world's first successful deployment of submarine-launched rockets against land targets, firmly establishing the Barb as a pioneer in military technology. This act, conducted in the freezing, remote waters of the Sea of Okhotsk, was a precursor to the modern strategic submarine, the platform for devastating precision cruise missiles launched from the depths decades later. Crucially, throughout her entire 12th Patrol history, a feat of sustained combat that few other submarines achieved, the Barb maintained one of the most remarkable records of the entire U.S. Navy. She completed every single war patrol without suffering a single crew casualty. In a service notorious for its high casualty rate, where approximately 1 in 5 submariners who went to sea did not return, this flawless safety record under Commander Fluckey's command speaks volumes about the meticulous preparation, the aggressive yet calculated tactical decisions, and the deep trust and professionalism exhibited by every man aboard the vessel. Fluckey's philosophy was simple: strike hard, strike fast, and never put the crew at undue risk. This commitment to both mission success and crew safety defined the Barb's legacy. The final tally for the Barb was devastating to the enemy. She was officially credited with sinking 17 ships, totaling 96,628 tons, placing her among the top-scoring submarines of the war. Her actions during Patrol 12, specifically the rocket attacks against Shari, Shikuka, Kashiho, and Shiritoru, added an indelible chapter to naval history, forever linking her name with innovation. The crew's successful installation and operation of the rockets demonstrated that a submarine was not limited to striking targets on the sea. It could strike targets from the sea, a distinction that reshaped naval doctrine. The war would conclude just 2 months later, and the Barb had played her part not only in destroying Japanese shipping, but in demonstrating the future of subsurface warfare. The deck launchers were a temporary, wartime modification, but the idea they represented was eternal: the submarine as a strategic launch platform. The success of the USS Barb and Commander Fluckey's relentless innovation ensured that the next generation of submarines would be designed to carry weapons capable of striking far inland, transforming the silent hunter into a global strategic asset. The legend of the Barb, the rocket-firing submarine, lives on as a testament to the ingenuity and courage of the men who fought the silent war in the Pacific.